Hey everybody, I'm Suzanne Barrett Justis, and in today's video, we're going to do a little posthumous portrait of a Bichon. And this little Bichon's name is Fibi. Now this was a very kind of a tender, touch my heart kind of thing, because this little Fibi reminds me so much of my little Fibi that I had. And if you remember, it was one of my earlier videos that I did on painting your dog's pet portrait, and I'll go ahead and put it up here so you can see it. But you know what? Painting this portrait was like, I could feel it in my heart because it's so much like my own little dog. And it's one of the blessings that I have as a professional artist to be able to, you know, give somebody, I don't know, something to cherish after their pet has died. And so in today's video, we're going to do this little posthumous pet portrait of a little white Bichon named Fibi. So stay with me and take it to the end. We'll go ahead and see how I wrap up this piece. And again, thanks so much for joining me. And if you are my subscribers, as always, you know you get tired of hearing it on every video, but I really do mean it when I say thank you so much. And if you're not my subscriber, here's your opportunity. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button, ring that bell, you'll know when the next video comes out. So let's go ahead and jump into this little painting of the Bichon named Fibi. So I will be starting the portrait of Miss Fibi, named after the Fibonacci math series of numbers, okay? But Fibi is a sweet little Bichon, and I loved this pose. I like this pose because she looks like she's just a little sassy thing. And that whole looking over the shoulder part, okay, that's precious. That is absolutely precious, and it was part of, I think, of her personality. And so I've got just a rough charcoal sketch on here, and I am going to go ahead and sort of block it in with a little bit of acrylic paint, just so I can see where everything's going and basically do somewhat of a value study. I am just using one color of gray acrylic paint to basically do a value study. So I'm using it more like a wash, and it also helps to solidify or firm up the vine charcoal. And one of the serendipitous things about vine charcoal is it does blend well with acrylic paint. All right, the palette for little Miss Fibi's portrait. I've got ivory black down here. I have, oh boy, brown madder here. I have a titanium white here. This is the Natural Tint by Saulnier. This, even though it looks kind of blue and goopy, it's just paints gray by Winsor Newton. I have Andantharine Blue by Richardson. I have Ultramarine Blue and Cobalt Blue by Winsor Newton. I have Celadon Deep by Charvine. This is the yellow of the 12 shades of gray. I have titanium white here. I have unbleached titanium and titanium buff. I have some more, these are two more of the grays. This is warm gray and this is mid-tone gray by the 12 shades. And this color is blush by Gamblin. So I know I'm probably gonna have a little alizarin on here, but this is what I'm starting with. Let's see how far I can go. Now I've mixed a kind of just a neutral type of gray using ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, a little bit of Payne's gray, and titanium white. And I'm just blocking in around the area that was what I originally did with just the acrylic paint. And I'm just using a large flat ivory filbert to go ahead and get this paint in. And I'm just trying to move it in through as quickly as I can. I just need to have the background in. And I generally work from the background to the foreground. So I'm just kind of cutting everything in and getting my shadows and all that good stuff and creating the depth. So again, now I'm going in, getting this brick wall in around, and then I'll do the gate or the fence in next. Okay, now it's time to start blocking in Phoebe herself. So interesting, right? I started in with this kind of a flesh tone, and the reason I did that is because she's a white dog, and basically her skin and a lot of her pigment will show through some of the white. So I did put just this kind of interesting flesh tone, and you're probably wondering, why is she going in with so much yellow? Well, obviously I wiped some of it off, but I need to have it glowing from underneath. So I'll be able to stack a lot of the other colors on top of this titanium white and cadmium yellow light mixture. And again, putting in the shadows and the dark values around everything. So I'm really working it off of both sides. I'm putting dark and light in at the same time. So again, I am wanting to make sure that she is perfectly coiffed and not quite as shaggy looking as it is in the original picture that I'm working from. So I have several different photos that I am working from just to make sure that she is perfectly groomed. And of course, I've got my handy dandy maul stick. So I'm going to cut in the shape of the eyes. And so I have to use my other reference picture since so much of her eye is obscured by hair in the other picture. So getting the nice little round Bichon eyes, something they've just got the most beautiful little eyes. Bichons do. They're full and round. So I'm getting those in, getting the shapes in. I'm using a small, I believe this is a number 2 ivory long filbert, and it does the trick. And it's, I'm not really doing any detail. I don't need it to be soft, but I'm just getting the shapes in. And you gotta know, my eyes are glued to my reference photos, and that's really important when you're working, especially if you're doing a portrait. I'm not just doing any Bichon. I'm doing a very specific little Bichon Frise named Phoebe. So I've got to get this in and get it in correctly. Now for that sweet little nose, we've got to get that in too. And you'll see me dropping my paintbrush quite a bit and checking my angles a lot to make sure the eyes and the nostrils all fall into the same place. And I'm looking at this now and it doesn't look like it does, but it will. Don't worry, I'll get it. But the color that I use to mix up her nose color, her nose leather, is a combination of burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, and umber, and a little bit of titanium white. She does have that interesting little pink nose. And yeah, she's adorable. So we're getting everything in and getting all, just the shapes in. I'm still at the very basic stage in this painting, and there will be a lot of corrections made along the way. But of course, I'm all about dark values, so I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that her nose has got our dark values in. And again, still using the same brush, the smaller number 2 ivory long filbert, and it's a great little brush. Gets a lot of that detail that I need to have in. And I'm still, if you see, it looks like I'm moving the brush around, but I'm not really laying paint down. It's because I'm constantly checking my angles. Now, so I'll move until it actually feels right, and I'll check angles and check mouth and check. I'm always making sure where her body parts are in relationship to another body part. So I'm looking at the distance between her nostril and her pupil and her lip and her chin and et cetera, et cetera. I'm always looking. So at this point, I'm just putting in a lot of the darker values that will eventually be covered up by a lot of hair. And I'm using a combination of ivory gray. That the light blue color that I'm just popping down is a combination of King's Blue and one of the medium grays of the 12 shades of gray. And I know that it's gonna, have some hair on top of it. So I have to lay the foundation for where the layered paint will go. And that's when I'll get into the nose hairs and all the fun stuff. And again, always checking my angles. And I will run my brush like this through the painting often just to make sure that everything's lining up, and I'll even run it again. And what I'm doing here is I'm running it against the reference over here on the side. Obviously you can't see it, but I'm taking my paintbrush and running the angles there too, correcting and checking again. I'm constantly checking and rechecking my angles on anything that I'm painting. And there's that paintbrush is a really good tool for so many things other than just laying down paint. Taking some ivory black, and I'm going to get the shape of these eyes in. And there's a lot of dark around this part of the eye. Probably not going to be able to do what I want to do at this point unless I switch pictures here. And I keep going back and forth between two pictures. And these pictures, this one, her eyes are, I'm actually looking at two different references. All right, go ahead and take this off for a second. You can see I'm looking at this one. She's a little bit more groomed. How she looks in this picture. I'm going to keep it soft through here. And I know that I'm going to be careful about the eye boogers, even though I'm kind of putting some area in here. I'll probably take it out because I know when she's coiffed, that would be non-existent. But I'm trying to get the actual shape of her eyes in here. So I may have them in temporarily. And she's got an eyelid that's down here, it kind of stops here. And it's everything's very dark. Same here. This is all bottom lid. And I did this, but I'm probably gonna take most of that out. So let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can see what's going on. Maybe even again. Working on the eyes, and I need to take this up. keep checking my angles, yeah. Softening a lot of this area up. I know how much my client misses her dog. I really do. This is never easy. Now I have different pictures of her eyes and I want to get the color correct. Bichons have dark eyes. And I'm looking at, she has a very pink nose. And I'm going to make her have the dark area around this part of her eye because I'm going to be grooming her, basically. And I want it to look as though you can see all the aspects, even including her lids, her upper lid. I'm using a 0 long filbert by Rosemary. This is a ivory. And I'm just kind of suggesting that this will be an area that's going to have some of the hair and white area around her muzzle and everything. And I am trying to stay within what everything looks like here. So I'm going in with a light, a flesh tone over the top of her nose. I don't want to look at that a little bit later when I go back and forth to the other picture. She's so beautiful. She's such a pretty girl. Okay, I'm gonna take it back out to the, so you can see what I'm doing. Now the reason I'm going in with these dark and pink colors and all these grays, because these are gonna be the colors that are gonna be seen through her fur. But you remember, I'm keeping her kind of blown out. So I'm going to go ahead and add some of the light fur, and I'm stacking it, okay? Just stacking this on. This part of her lip would be a little darker. I'm probably going to have to create a picture that has side-by-side pictures so that I can get the lighting correct. So I can see that it's darker on this side, and this is gonna stand out. But of course, I'm trying to keep her kind of blown out. And it's just that little lip. This bottom part of her chin area would be a little bit darker because of the lighting. So I'm gonna go underneath it and suggest that it is a little bit rounder, and darker. I am going to lighten up some of these areas, and I'm trying not to give it too much texture, as if she had a full blown out groom, she would be very round and full. Now, if you remember, if you go back and watch one of my videos, it's one of my earlier videos, and it's still to this date my best performing video, the one I did of my dog Fibi, who was also a Fibi. She was half Bichon. She was a poodle Bichon, and I kept her groomed in more of a Bichon type head. I liked her head round. I'm getting those little sweet dog lips there. So I'm a little bit familiar with the breed as far as I had a half breed, but I understand the fullness that the head should be, and I'm trying to honor that. So I'm going in with a little bit lighter gray. So this little part of her lip would be a little bit lighter. I want to go out this way a little bit because I'm trying to keep it soft, and I'm probably working against myself a little bit because I need this to be wet. So I'm going to stay on the inside of this right now because I can't really do what I want to do until I go back and wet my background a little bit. And I had done this actually a while ago. I've since then have finished other paintings. So I'm going to give her a little bit of that. Well, I do have that already in. I'm just always looking at making sure that these line up correctly. I want to make sure that all my angles are, you know, before I go setting in a bunch of detail, I don't want to. So I'm going to look at where this eye is in relationship to the nose. If that nose is correct, that eye is correct, but I got to bring this out a little bit more. So this is why we always are checking our angles. Let's just see what happens if I go out a little bit from this area. And this is only going to be out a little bit. I guess what it is I need to have this wet. I need my wet paint. This will make me nuts until I get it fixed because I can't do what I want to do. But I'm going to see just this part of her head, and it's going to be a little bit longer out to this area. So the distance between this is more of an angle. So we're coming out a little bit more. Sometimes it's just me working out angles, and it looks weird because I made a very sharp, but it kind of goes out that way. So we're going to take those out. This is going to come out a little bit more, and this is going to come out a little bit more. Keep going back out. You don't want to get too big though. So here I'm putting down little Miss Phoebe onto her canvas. Now, my client did ask that I make sure she is groomed. Well, in the photo reference that I have of her that I'm working from, she's not in bad shape. I mean, her grooming, her Bichon clip looks good, except it's not all poofed out. So what I did was I took some of her other photographs and presented them in the side by side like this, so I can make sure that she's not too hairy. So you can see here, you can see the eyes well, but this is the photo reference that I'm mainly working from, and her eyes are somewhat obscured by hair. So what I'm going to be doing is using these other photos to, in a sense, groom up. little Miss Phoebe here. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. I've moved my palette so I can do a more of a side-by-side. So hopefully you'll be able to see some of the paints that I'm using, and I hope to try to call it out for you. Since my background is currently dry and I need to have wet paint to do a wet edge and a soft edge, I am having to kind of re-wet that whole background. And so you can see I'm using the background paint, and it's a little bit off, but it won't matter here in the end. But I need it to be wet so that I can make soft edges with the fur. So everything that's around Phoebe's head will have to be wet. So that's what I'm doing now. And once I have it, just everything ready to roll here, I'm going to go ahead and start laying down some more of the fur on Phoebe's head and the peripheral edges of her head so that I can fade that or make those really nice soft edges. And so I'll put more of the yellows and whites in, and I'll run it right up to the edge. And you'll see I've got to have my handy dandy maul stick so I have something to lean on. And I'm going back in with a Series 81 sable. And so you can see I'm just kind of softening it up. I'm trying to make it look like she's got a blowout. And that's basically, with a Bichon, you want that puffball head where you almost can't tell where the ears start and the jaw starts. It looks like just one big puffball. And that's what I'm working on here. So I've got to use that sable to soften all the edges. I use the ivory filbert to put the paint down, and then I go back in and soften everything up with the sable. Okay. It's very soft. It's very hard to detect. Let me see if I can pull it in a little bit more. Okay, I can't do what I want to do. So like this, just a tad. So what I'm trying to do is create that really soft edge. And I am going to go in with my little sable and just hit that edge. I need it to be very soft, almost look like a powder puff. And I'm pushing the paint. I'm not. But you almost have to have that wet paint to work in, or it won't work. So now on the interior part, I can blend up to the edge, but I want to keep that super soft. I want it to almost like you can't tell where it begins and stops. So I'm actually going to soften this out a little bit more. And I don't like that I have values almost touching here, so I'm fixing that. Okay. So I'm going to zoom back out. Let's go ahead and put it back down to this at least. Turn it just a tad. Because I've got to be mindful of where the other values are in the ear. And I'm going to put some grays in here. And there's a little bit darker grays right in this area. So this side of her face is a little bit. This is where I do not need glasses. Now I do have to be careful because I'll have to switch back to my other picture. And this is where for me, I do use a lot of different references. Now, I want to make this part of her jaw just a little bit darker. So you can see where the little chin hair starts and stops. She's adorable. Oh my gosh, folks. It makes me think of my little dog Phoebe, and it's just weird. Yeah. So it's slowly getting a little bit more shape. I'm using a lot of different grays, mainly out of the 12 shades of gray. I've got it mixed with a little bit of paint, but since I already have wet paint down from earlier, I can actually mix this gray right in there, and it seems to be doing the trick. I'm trying to work that area. I love how she's looking over her shoulder. Now, I had to kind of talk my client into this particular picture because she remembers her dog in a certain way. And of course, she remembered her basically always being groomed and probably in a more, I don't know. The pictures that she had were adorable. But obviously, when you're dealing with, oops, we got a leak there. When you're dealing with a posthumous portrait, there's no going back and getting more pictures, right? So I'm having to work with what she gave me. And a lot of the photographs that she had of Phoebe were taken at kind of odd angles. And that is one problem I have a lot when working with clients' photos, is the photographs taken for the references that I have to work from are often distorted. They're looking down on the dog and they are not flattering, or they're just not right. And I can't work from those. Now, I can use them as references to, oh, the eyes look great in this photo reference, or I like her pose in this one. But if you don't take good photos, it makes my job as an artist and a painter a little bit more challenging. And yeah, and I need to have good photos to work from. And I mean, I hate to tell people, like, you know, you don't want to say, I'm sorry, but I can't work from these photographs. But what I liked about this particular picture was how she's got that sassy look and she's looking over her shoulder. And she said, oh no, she was a really sassy girl. And I'm like, I get that from this one picture. So I talked her into let me do it. She said, you're the artist, you do what you think. And I said, thank you. But she was very, I guess her hesitation was the fact that she wasn't very well groomed in this picture. And that's why I said, well, I'll clean her up. I'll make her look really well groomed. So that is what I'm doing. So I'm taking some of the 12 shades of gray, green gray, I'm sorry, the yellow gray, and I'm putting just a little bit of texture in here, because I know once I get in here, I'll have to really fuzz her out. But again, I need to stay kind of focused as much as I can in this area. We're going to give it a darker area here so that when I'm going to make it look like her head is over the top of her shoulder. So I need this dark surface, this wet surface to work into. So I'm going to pull that around. What a funny little dog. So I'm going to go ahead and get the top of her head, going back in, make sure my brush is nice and clean because I want it to be the light. It's kind of, I'm using a white with just a tiny, like barely a dab of yellow, cadmium yellow light in it. And I'm pushing up. And I think I have to take some of that out. Little face. Clean. Sable. And why I like the sable for this job here is it's super soft. And it allows me to have a light hand, and I'm using it mainly just to blend, okay? Now, I kind of got a little crazy here, and I think I'm gonna take some of that out because there is a little bit of a steeper angle in this part, and just because I am grooming her, so to speak, it doesn't mean I have to go completely against my initial reference as far as actual structure. So I'm gonna pull this down a little bit. Down a little bit. Just a little bit. Because I actually think that once I'm checking angles against the reference. So if that's my high point. Now I'm actually okay. I think. Okay, we're gonna just keep that soft like that. Okay, it's coming. Okay, I'm looking for subtle changes, so I am putting a little bit of this gray because I want this part of her head to be very round and light. So I've got to have something to jump off of here, and I'm trying to watch my angles. And so this kind of comes out a little bit. I'm pushing this in a little bit more so I can bring out this little aspect of her head. And she will have a little bit of a rounder poof here. So since I can see, it'll kind of come out like this. And I'm using one of the other the photo references for the grooming. And this is going to come down like this. And this will be up here. I'm going to give it a little bit more dark. Right between the eyes here. Because even though they have this fur, you know, they're shaved into this form, they do have what is called a break right there where their muzzle comes out from their skull, basically. Now, they're not as snouty or muzzly as, say, a poodle. And interesting enough, my dog Fibi that I had, she was a poodle Bichon mix. So she probably had more of a look of a Bichon. But she was smaller, a little bit, you know, obviously much smaller. Okay, we're gonna bring this down a little bit here. I'm looking at the little shadow and lights here. And okay. So I'm still getting her form, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm just creating the form, but I'm trying to use the two photos side by side one of her groomed, one of her not as groomed, and mixing those together, morphing them. And I'm seeing, where does this kind of stop up here? Going up a little bit. And it's getting softer and softer because I'm working into wet paint, but I need it to stay dark down low. And I have to create that little domey head. All right, so she's starting to look a little bichon-y. I like that. I think I'm going to use that. Is that is that a good adjective to describe her? She's bichon-y. One of the problems that sometimes happens with little white dogs is something called tear staining, and also they can get that same staining in their muzzle area. And I'm trying not to put too much of it in, but I feel like I gotta put some just because I need to actually burn sienna. I'm just giving her a little bit of depth here, and of course I'm gonna cover most of this over, but I just wanna make it, because let's face it, it's called life. They're gonna have a little bit of staining here. And I'm going to be covering it with some other fur, but I wanted to get that in just a little bit. Using a little bit of ultramarine blue and graying it down with the burnt sienna. And I'm still putting a little bit of this in here, because it'll give me something to do the little light hairs off of later. Now I have to watch my angles because I do have this set like this, and I've got to make sure the nostrils line up with the actual eyes. And remember, I am working from several different pictures here. So I'm going with my original picture, but just going with the grooming. So I got to drop this a little bit. I just have the angles not quite. So I'm adding a little bit of ivory black. I've got this muzzle, it's just a little bit off, and it's got to be more like this. I have to so this should be like this. And so we're getting it. It's little bits. I know it seems strange, but I'm going to pull this down. I've got to fix the nose. I need a smaller brush. Now I'm starting to get into some more of the fun stuff, and that's all the detail. And of course, you know how much I love doing eyes, and I'm just lightening up the little bit of her eye, and I'm putting in her upper lid and her lower lid and the shine and all that, even her little white eyelashes. So yeah, this is kind of the stuff that I love. Now, I will have her eyes almost completed, but none of the detail or the dark values or the light values going in around the eyes. I'm working on it. It's slowly coming in, but I don't want to rush it too much. So I'm also having to, realize that I am using several different photo references, but I still have to keep the light consistent as is in the original photo of her looking over her shoulder. So I need the light. The light has to show through. So I know I have one cool side of her face and one highly lit side of her face, and I have to constantly keep that in my mind. So I'm just laying it down, And I can tell we're getting closer to the end, and I can afford to be a little bit more impasto with my paint now, especially in the areas where it's going to be very, very light. And you can see even now I'm still going in and using that sable because I still want her to seem round and fluffy and not, I want her to feel just like a cotton ball. That's what a Bichon looks like. So getting it in, of course I'm using a lot of different values and temperatures of grays here just to keep it soft and getting it all in. Okay, so I'm getting in a lot of her tail, her tail lights. I say tail lights because she's got so much light playing on that nice little plume of a tail. And, but I also got to keep the interesting shadows on that back end that she's got. So I'm using, believe it or not, a lot of a green gray, and it's creating the depth. So I have to have, so in just the tail area, the tail itself, I want it to look like you can, see some of the brick wall behind it. So I'm using a lot of blue grays in the tail. And then I'm starting to block in the clumps of hair where we have the light. And so I'm also going to be using my dagger brush here in a minute. Now I am still using that same ivory long filbert, and I believe that's a number 4. And I'm showing you now I've got the dagger, and this is where I get to do the fun stuff like the hairs. And I love using a dagger brush, and it creates the detail. Now I can do individual strands, and this is so much fun. If you don't have a dagger brush, get you one, because they are awesome for creating long hairs and all kinds of interesting, great shapes, because it holds a lot of paint. And I'm working those legs and still wanting to have that wet edge. And so again, I have to, I'm working off that dark blue in the background so I can keep having that edge and creating the form in her leg. Now I have to be careful because I do want her coiffed, but I do want to be able to show where her hock is or where her ankle is and where her knee is, etc. So I'm trying to be careful because I know even a coiffed dog's going to have some clumps, believe it or not. But this is the fun stuff. I'm sorry my head keeps getting in the way, but yeah. So I am really rolling through this piece and enjoying every minute of it as I'm starting to come down to the home stretch. And I spent pretty much the majority of this particular day on just working on the tail and back end. Stone or slate, I'm not sure if it's pressed concrete, but the floor or the ground surface that little Miss Fibi is standing on is something, I need to address. So here is my painting. Now I still have a lot of detail to work on her face, but I've got to do the actual concrete patio area. So what I've done is down here, let's see here if I can show you without creating too much of a shadow. I've squirted out some paint. Let me turn this light off. So what I did was I have 3 different titanium whites. I mean, it's all the same paint, but I'm just going to mix some values of the same thing. Here I have, this is Payne's Gray. It's a Winsor Newton. I have Winsor Newton Van Dyke Brown, and I have the Sennalier's Natural Tint. And over here I have a little bit of yellow ochre, and that happens to be Georgian. So I'm going to mix a large volume of paint to go over the surface And so we're gonna go ahead and flip it back up here, and it's going to go right here. So I've got to work on this whole area, and I wanna get that done pretty quickly. So we're gonna go ahead and time lapse it, just so I can get that, that surface in. And I want it, I'm not gonna put a ton of detail in, but I do wanna suggest where she's standing, because this is the back patio where she used to live at her home with her mom. So I want to make it just so. So we're gonna get that in. After laying in the paint with the ivory filbert, I go ahead and smooth it over, and then I grab my sword brush and lay in the tile cracks, if you will. Yep, you can use that brush for lots of good things. And then I kind of raise up the edges a little bit and work the grout. And yeah, so I don't want my emphasis to be strictly on the tile, so I do try to soften it up with a little bit of a natural hair brush and create that shadow. And yeah, that's how I'm working that tile work here, folks. So I have the patio down, so now she has an actual familiar setting for her, for the dog in the portrait. So you can see, here we go. So there is the dog in the portrait. So now we're just ready to go ahead and do the fine details. And most of the fine details are going to happen right here in that little sweet little face. So I'm going to start really working from between the eyes and the eye area and work my way out from the eyes. And because she is in a full Bichon groom, there's not gonna be a lot of hairiness. Now I have more hairiness, if you will, in her body, and I've got to do some more work in her her nether regions in this area back here. But really, I'm feeling pretty good about how she looks. And obviously her head looks a lot more yellow than the rest of her body, but we're getting ready to fix that. So this is gonna change just a little bit, and we're about to wrap this one up, folks. Now I'm toning down a lot of the yellow, and I'm using kind of a bluey purple in there, and just to tone it down, and creating all the nuances and detail that goes into making her face. And this is the fun part for me, guys. And I really want to emphasize her eyes, and I gave her a little bit more shine than she originally had when I first started the eyes. Delineating the ears, but of course when they have the Bichon blowout, sometimes they just look like they're a big round cotton ball. They don't really have a whole lot of delineation. So I'm kind of coming in between everything, just, after having studied her photo references. Putting in a little bit more impasto paint and creating that little round Bichon head, but she's coming together and I'm really pleased. We are done. So here you have little Miss Fibi, and she's such a little sassy pants. Now I turned the overhead light on so I can show you better, but I went a little impasto in some areas of the painting, and maybe I need to turn the light back on because it does look wet. So no, I did go a little impasto in some areas, like the hock area, and some areas, like especially around here, you can see that the paint is quite thick. And I just wanted to be able to show that she's, she's a fluffy girl. And you can see how in thick the paint is, very impasto in the muzzle area and different areas of her head on the very sides. You can see that paint is very thick, and it's helping to give that volume. When you're working with a lot of white, and it's white that is, you have varying degrees of shades of gray, so to speak, you have to kind of really play it out. That's kind of the fun part about working with whites, as it is when you're working with blacks. And there, that's it. I really had a fun time. Like I said, there was a bit of an emotional journey for me on this piece because she is so much like my Fibi. And yeah, so I'm hoping that my client loves the piece and will cherish it for a very long, 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 long time. And we're done. So here, I'm going to go ahead and show you right here the finished piece of little Miss Fibi. And I had to, I can show you the side-by-side pictures that I was using to do the portrait, and, I can show them here. What I was doing was really taking some of the pictures, some of the pictures that my client gave me of the dog when she was perfectly coiffed, you know, had her, you know, full blowout on her hairdo. But the photo reference that I used mainly was the one where she's just looking back over her shoulder. She just looks so sassy. She was that sassy look. And I get it, because I used to have a sassy little Fibi, so I know how this is. And my goal is to give my client just, you know, I get it. She doesn't have her dog anymore, so now she'll have this painting, and I want her to cherish it forever. So that's what this is all about, and I must have the best job in the whole wide world to get to do this sort of thing. So again, thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions about anything I covered in today's video, please leave it in the comments section. I'll get to it. And if you enjoyed watching today's video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. That's important for me too. And if you have a suggestion on something you'd like to see in an upcoming video, again, leave it in the comment section. And if you are my subscribers, as always, thank you so much. And if you're not, go ahead and subscribe. Please do that for me. And yeah, that's it. So from Kingsport, Tennessee, I'll see you till next time. Bye.